Hello everyone, this is the great Lord and Master, Osiron, the Eternal. Okay, what I have today is a continuation of the Nordic theme. As you know, I have a series called the Yggdrasil, and I show how that turns into an octahedron Kundalini grid. It's actually one of my favorite videos. It's also one of the shortest too, so if you haven't seen that one yet, you'll definitely want to see that before you watch this. Okay, what I have here, some of you may know this construct just by sight. But what this construct is, I'll try to pronounce it properly, but it's called the Aegishjalmer. And what that means is it's the helm of awe or the helm of terror. And it's a Viking, Nordic, magical stave. And I was turned on to this construct by a friend of mine named Lokia. Okay? And they were in turn turned on to this by a person called Thunder Wizard. As a matter of fact, he was the one who created the number sequence for the runes. Because what these numbers around the wheel represent at their core level is the 24 Elder Futhark runes. Okay? But I'm not going to use or be talking about the runes in their lore today. So if you want to learn more about the actual Nordic lore and the runes about that, check out Thunder Wizard's YouTube page. I'll post a link below for that. This is mainly how this structure in the number symmetry work with the single digit code to reveal some amazing geometry. What this is, and when you take the numbers and lay out the 24 runes around the wheel, what you do is you start with 1 on the first prong of this little 3-prong spoke. You go 1, 2, 3 all the way around, and then that will jump to the middle, then 9, 10, 11 all the way around, and then it'll pick up again 17, 18, 19 and go all the way around. And then it'll end with 24 here, and that's the 24 runes, and it forms this number pattern. And you'll notice, or you may notice, that when you reduce all of these numbers together, they eventually reduce to either a 3, 6, or a 9. That's all they reduce to. And what that does, if you start at the top here and you go around to here, the 4th position, it will produce this sequence. It will go 9, 3, which is 9, and then the bottom reduces to a 3. The next will be 3, 6. It's almost in the same position of the axis of the Great Lord on the Osiron Tarot spiral. But in this case, the 3 is on top and the 6 is on the bottom. And then the next one is 6, 9, 6 and 9, and the 4th one is 9 and 3. So you're starting up, you're going around this way until you use them all up, and it ends with this pattern here. And it gives you the 9, 3, 3, 6, 6, 9, and 9, 3. You'll notice that it starts with a 9, 3, and it also ends with a 9, 3. And then if you add up the 2 columns, this column becomes 27, which is an important number we all know about. And the second column adds to 21. And if you add both of those, it becomes 48. But if you reduce this 27, that becomes 9, and you reduce this becomes a 3, so it's showing the 9, 3 perspective again. Now, this lower chart here is sort of showing it in a different way as to what's going on here. There's only one sequence that is 3 and 6, okay, and the rest all have one common link. All the rest of them have a 9 somewhere in the structure. So I got that isolated here. These 3 is separate from this because these 3 all have the 9 in common. And this is the only one that's a standalone 3-6 presentation. And it gives this. And what it shows it as is it shows 2 3s are paired with a 9, and then 1 6 is paired with a 9. And we see this all the time, the 33, the Pillar of Yakin adds to 33. All over the place, this 33 shows up. Now, one thing this does is this shows two powerful structures in geometry. One of them, this reveals the cube, and as you know, the Yggdrasil the Yggdrasil reveals a cube-octahedron matrix. But this also reveals a cube-octahedron, which is a polyhedron, which is an amazing construct. I believe the cube-octahedron may have been discovered by Buckminster Fuller. But he is linked to it somehow. I forget exactly how he is. He may have been the one to discover it, though. But this will reveal a cube in its machinations. It'll also reveal a cube-octahedron in its machinations. And to give you the cube, it does something interesting with the 9. It shows 9 as a 0 and a 9. So if you, in this case, the 9 will act as a 0. If the 9 takes the action of a 0, then it leaves you a 3, which is the axis points on the cube, the 3 axes in the cube. Now if you use the 9 and you add 9 to 3, that becomes 12, which is the 12 connecting lines of a cube. And down here, it works either way. It can be one or the other. You can either just call it a 6, or you can add 9 to 6, which gives you 15, the devil, which becomes 6 for the 6 faces of the cube. Okay. Now the other way, if you take this 3, 3, and 6, and put the 6 in the middle, it'll give you the planes of the cube-octahedron, and you see that here. This is a cube-octahedron, and it's broken up into planes. The top plane has 3 connecting lines. The middle has 6 connecting lines, and the bottom again has 3 connecting lines. And that's showing you the plane levels of the cube-octahedron. And then you see down here this little construct here, that the Star of David, or the Jewish star. This is sort of like the top-down view of the cube-octahedron. It's got the masculine fire triangle, it's got the feminine triangle, and it has the hexagon surrounding it. And this is what you see if you look down on top of a cube-octahedron, just looking at its plane levels. Now, there's something interesting too. On the last video I made a huge mistake on video. I put it in the comments and in the description, the correction of that. I showed how this is the 2D presentation of what happens when you use the 64 hexagram grid. And I showed how it's 4 in the middle, the next level is 12, the third level is 20, and the fourth level is 28. Well, this shows up here on the 4th position of this Aegishjalmer construct. So you go 1, 2, 3, 4, and the numbers of all the runes that land here are this 2D block face. It starts with a 4, it goes, the next is a 12, and the third is a 20. And if you were to extend this 24 to 28, it would end with 28. So this particular aspect of this construct here is showing the 2-dimensional 64 grid in its machinations. And all these 3 numbers reduce to 20, first 36, 3 and 6, and then become a 9. And the exact opposite over here is the numbers 8, 16, and 24, which become 48. We see this 48, which if you add up all the 3, 6, 9s, it becomes 48. And we're seeing this on this end, and then that reduces to 12, then 3. The number interplay is pretty cool too. The one in the middle here reduces to a 9. It reduces to 27, then 9. On the lower here, it reduces to 39, which is the pillar of Boaz using the tarot keys, and then it becomes 12, then 3. There's so many interesting correlations with the numbers. On the axis here, you see a 33, then you see a 45 over here, and all kinds of things. You'll also notice, if you look at this, it looks like the beginnings of what would be the Yi Jing, the Bagua ring of the Yi Jing. It looks like that because what this is a construct, and over here you'll see this. You see this little pitchfork thing? Well, this is one of the spokes of this wheel, and you can see how this relates to 3 and 6. Okay, the top, the actual pitchfork end has 3 open ends, 1, 2, and 3. Okay, and now on the construct below that, the 3 lines, it has 6 open ends. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. So that's giving you a 3-6 presentation on each one of these staves. Okay, now if you multiply, and if you add 3 and 6, obviously becomes 9. And if you add 9 times 8, that gives you 72. And we see this here. And I have videos on 72 and the importance of 72. The last video I made showed what happens when you show the true tree of life and the jewel in the masculine working aspects, and you combine those numbers, it becomes 72. But now, if you add the ring here, that becomes 72. Now if you add each pie shape plus the center point, that gives you 81 for this end, the 81, which is pretty amazing. But now, there is a point I want to make about the cube, because in the previous video I mistakenly said it jumps in intervals of 16 per cube frame, but that was a mistake. It really jumps in 24. So the cube, so once you establish the core of a cube, it will start jumping out 24 blocks per frame as it evolves to each level, okay? It's not 16, I made a huge mistake with that. It's 24, but that's even more significant, because 2 and 4 becomes 6. 2 plus 4 equals 6, and we all know the cube is associated with 6, the material world. All the links just keep stacking on top of each other here. So that's what happens with this. But there's actually 2 cubes. This is important. This is going to show the context of 0 and 1. There's actually a masculine cube and a feminine cube, because this cube here, if you were to start with a 1, if you started with a 1 in the center of the cube, that would be the core here of 1. And the next evolution to produce equal symmetry, if you start with a 1 in the center, is 27 blocks. So you got the 1 in the middle, and then it takes 27 blocks total to form its next level of equal symmetry for the cube. But now, if you were to start with 0, which is which ends up producing the masculine cube, remember, the core symmetry for that structure is 8. Because we start with 0, then you have 1, and 1 becomes 2, 2 becomes 4, and then 4 becomes 8, and you keep doubling. It reaches its core symmetry at 8. So the feminine cube starts with a 1 at its core, the masculine has an 8 as its core, and the next level of evolution for the 1 is 27, the third evolution is 125, and for the masculine cube, the first evolution is 8, the next evolution is 64, the next evolution after that is 216. Now what you're going to notice, when you keep adding layers to the cube, it produces a code, and this code repeats to infinity. And the code for the feminine cube is 198, and the code for the masculine cube is 819. And this keeps repeating and repeating until infinity. It goes 198, 198, 198, and this does its code to infinity as well. But now if you add this string to this string, it reveals 9 and then 18. So if you add both rows together, it'll be 918. But now you got to be really careful how you draw this. If you were to draw this the wrong way, it would give the illusion, the false illusion, that the masculine precedes the feminine. The way I have it drawn is 0 is taking its neutral position above this, sort of just like the true tree of life, and then the 1 goes here, and then the 8 goes here, which is 1 is the lower number and it's feminine, 8 is the higher number and it's masculine. So it's going in order, 0, then 1, and 8. But if you were to draw that like this, the way I draw it up here, in the beginning, it will look like the masculine precedes the feminine, because when you put the 0 on this side, it takes its position on the masculine column, and then the feminine is over here, and it looks like the feminine is in a secondary position to the masculine, but that's an illusion and that's false. So you can see how it would be very easy to form the conclusion that masculine indeed comes first over the feminine, but if you use it the wrong way. But what really happens is this 0 doesn't count, so you get the 0 out of there because it's not part of the 1. So, and what that would do is it would cause each row to jump up 1 position. So then it would be starting a 2 over here, and then it would go to 1, which is obviously cockeyed and backwards. So if you draw this the wrong way, it's going to give a false presentation that we could say that the masculine precedes the feminine, but it doesn't. It's only if you draw it that way. And what happens if you were to use that construct, it does what happens with the 0 and 1. 0 is feminine to the 1, and the 1 would take the masculine position only in relation to the 0, as I've described in several other videos, but then it would revert and shift to masculine and feminine. So that's a very confusing, cockeyed way to do it. But if you do it like this, it shows the 2 blocks as 1 feminine and then the masculine, and it gives you the code of ultimately 918 that repeats to infinity. And now, if you recall from the video, as I mentioned in the beginning, the Yggdrasil uses is a cube matrix with an octahedron core. Okay. Now, if you take the faces of the octahedron, which is 8, and add the faces of the cube, which is 6, that gives you 14, which reduces to a 5. And the cube will fit. You can fit 5 nested cubes into a dodecahedron to fill that space up, and it creates a dodecahedron. There's more, to find out more about that geometry, you can watch Dan Winter. He's very good at that. As a matter of fact, there is a link to the cubeoctahedron and the dodecahedron in Dan Winter presentations. What he does is he shows a ball, and it involves spin. And if you hold this ball structure made out of like connect sticks or something like that, and you spin it, it'll take one form as a cubeoctahedron, and then when you spin it, it turns into a dodecahedron, or vice versa. But I just forget what the context of that was. I was trying to find it earlier, but Dan Winter videos are all like 2 hours long, so I was trying to find that segment in a few of his videos, but I just couldn't find it for this to give you the exact context of what he's talking about when he talks about that. But there is a link with the cubeoctahedron and the dodecahedron, and the dodecahedron is shows up in a lot of structures. It shows up in DNA. The Earth grid is made up of a dodecahedron. So many things are made up of that structure, the dodecahedron. But the cubeoctahedron plays an important part in that, because the cubeoctahedron has 24 connecting lines as well. So we're seeing the connection with this and the 24 runes. We got 24 connecting lines in the cubeoctahedron, and the cube frame grows by 24 blocks per frame. So we're seeing an important link with the number 8, the 24 runes, and the cube and the cubeoctahedron. And if the cubeoctahedron also produces what they call vector equilibrium. And what that means is all the connecting lines, all the nodal points on the cubeoctahedron will connect to the center point with equal length lines. So every connecting line on the structure will have equal length lines, and that forms what they call vector equilibrium. So, and that means you could extend the structure to infinity, and it would always connect and work, and every nodal point would be constructed of the same number of lines. So this structure here links with the Yggdrasil, and what that ultimately becomes is the octahedron Kundalini grid, and it works hand in hand with the cubeoctahedron. It's very amazing. And again, over here, if you take the octahedron and you use a die, the dice for like D&D, the faces on the octahedron, its oppositions all produce 9. So 1 is opposed by 8, 2 is opposed by 7, 3 is opposed by 6, and 4 is opposed by 5, and that all reduces to 9. Now the cube does it like this. It goes 1 is opposed by 6, 2 is opposed by 5, and 3 is opposed by 4, which reduces to 7. And you combine this 9 to this 7, it gives you the Tower, which is card 16 of the tarot, it's always important to acknowledge, or to at least keep in mind what tarot cards relate to all these numbers. It sort of helps show the power of what the tarot's talking about and how things work with that. And we sort of see that here with this row here adding up to 21, which is the 21 tarot keys, but the zodiac using the Osiron tarot spiral ends with card 21 going around the zodiacal wheel for the core of the Osiron tarot spiral. It's pretty amazing. So this is the Aegishjalmer, the helm of awe or the helm of terror. And this is amazing. So it's also showing, now the important part of this, it's showing that there was an ancient knowledge that was lost at some point in time, and it's a very simplified, it uses very simplified means of transmission. So in this thing, this is a very simple structure, but it's showing you 3 and 6. It's also showing you 8. And it also looks like the I Ching. The I Ching is also a very simple structure. And we know that the oldest mummies in China are all Caucasoid. So the oldest mummies ever found in China could have come from Europe. You know, we know that as a fact. That's not speculation. And we also see the Vedic knowledge, the Vedic math, and the Vedic structures. I mean, this almost looks like Shiva's pitchfork here, or Neptune, or a pitchfork for Neptune, or whatever it is. So we're seeing all these simplistic structures being passed through the cultures, and then this is a Nordic construct. You know what I mean? It's conveying a lot of powerful information via what appears to be simplistic structures. Let me say that, because you got this simplistic structure presenting this powerful information when you use the number code, which is derived from the runes themselves. So 1 through 24 goes around here, and then it reveals this all kinds of crazy stuff. I mean, the Cubeoctahedron is big, and how it's also showing the Star of David thing. There's one thing that I'm trying to understand myself, because I have such an animosity towards the Jews, and because of that animosity, I look at their symbols like this, Star of David, and the Hebrew letters, and even the Kabbalah in a negative light, and that's just an example of the Jewish poison, infecting my own perceptions. Because the truth of it is that the information that the Jews claim as their own was actually stolen knowledge from an older age, and it was perverted. So in all of these structures about the true tree of life, when I start bashing the Kabbalistic tree of life or anything else that comes from the Jew, I'm not bashing the old knowledge. What I'm doing is taking issue with their perversion of the knowledge. That's a key distinction. So the Hebrew letters should be looked at deeper as a powerful, because even Dan Winter says in his presentations that the Hebrew letters are actually symbols of geometry that show different angles of waveform and shit like that. It's really amazing. But and the same thing with this star here. This star obviously isn't Jewish. The Jews took it and used it for their own ends, and they perverted it. The same thing with the tree of life. The tree of life structure isn't Jewish, but the Jews took it and perverted the meaning of it. Same thing with the cross. The Christian cross isn't a negative evil structure, but it was taken by negative evil people and used in a negative and evil way. They pervert what is truth and make it so when you view those symbols, you look at those symbols in a negative light, like 666, the pentagram, all of it. So it's up to us as individuals to see past the poison that was done to these obviously ancient truths that were of an age gone by that we've forgotten, and this is a perfect example of that. The Yggdrasil is another amazing example of that. When you look with when you see what happens with the Yggdrasil and how it becomes the octahedron kundalini grid using the single digit code to do it, it's just absolutely amazing. And so is this. I mean, the fact that all these numbers in this sequence reduced to a 3, 6, or a 9 is really, really powerful. And this aspect here is amazing too. This is showing the cube So the position of this is pretty amazing as well, and how it's opposed by the 48, all of it. So that's it. Thank you, and namaste.